All right, so let me just introduce Steve as well. Steve is the Director of Security Solutions, Security Architect and Principal Engineer at Intel. Okay, thanks for joining us, Steve. So,
Glad
Keith,
I got the technology situation working.
We got the technology, excellent. Okay, so Keith, in a nutshell, I mean, do you want to, as far as you know, from your perspective, what's the marketing dilemma in cloud mobility right now?
Well, the marketing dilemma is very simple. I made a statement earlier, and that statement was you now need to, for every one on-premise opportunity, you need an upwards of 6, 7, I've heard some statistics around 8 times the number of cloud opportunities. But when you really start to look at funnel development, you need that many more marketing leads and that many more quality marketing leads to get to those numbers. It is quite frankly a numbers game when it comes to marketing. But what we have found is that you really need to be smart about the marketing. You need to create things such as thought leadership. You need to create things such as gravity in the marketplace so that people naturally and customers naturally will move toward your capabilities as a business. We believe, Ken and I believe, the days of solely focusing on product-centric messaging, i.e. you get the email saying come to this webinar that's focused on this technology, is going by the wayside. The webinars that people attend nowadays are webinars where there's a particular thought leader, an expert speaking, where there's a particular topic of interest. And if a company can position themselves that way, they're much more positioned to get higher quality leads and to get leads that will get them to the 6 to 7 to 8 times the number of opportunities potentially that they need to get to.
Okay, let me ask you on that from that side. I agree with you 110%. Okay, I think that just sort of a sales pitch type situation nobody likes to be sold to. So ultimately, definitely agree that people that there's a better response to a guru or to an expert or to somebody who's in essence sharing content, right? What kind of format are you seeing working best in regards to delivery, or what's the word I'm looking for here? Sort of storyline in essence.
Yeah.
For that pitch.
It's interesting. I'm seeing it evolve actually, Max. That's why I say it's interesting. It is along the lines of just think of it this way: when you get email out is not going away anytime soon. So when you click on an email of interest, that's exactly what it is. It's of interest. It's of a topic. It's a speaker. It's something of interest that you're going to want to click on. That's going to give you some knowledge. Now, the mechanisms. I'm seeing more and more video. I'm seeing more and more along those lines where, quite frankly, because that's the medium now that a lot of people are adhering to. But really, when you start to think about it, look at the smartphones, look at the tablets, look at all of these mechanisms now. Mobility is just, Ken and I spoke at Exchange, and the topic of mobility is huge. And that is the next wave, if not the wave, for the delivery of these sort of things around thought leadership, around differentiating yourself. Because quite frankly, look at the smartphone usage, look at the tablet usage, look at all these different all the different statistics around the usage. It's so tremendous right now that you would be a fool not to try to adhere to that wave and that trend.
Max, this is Ken Thorson. I just want to jump on Keith's point there. The concept we really studied was talking about how to break through the messaging, and so almost not only the video cast, but we like to have ongoing events every quarter that are like a business breakfast that people may be involved in, but the topic matter would be existing customers, and customers talking about the impact of whatever technology, whatever software product, hardware product that they are using, but talking about it from the end user viewpoint. So if we're going to be talking about customer service, we'll be talking about how a certain solution impacted customer service. And those kinds of people attract other people. As Keith talked about, building gravity is a very important element. So we found that a regular cadence of events at the same date and time, creating that forum of opportunities is a very important idea. Second part of the idea there also is to make sure that because the cloud business model is changing for the manufacturers, the vendors, and the partners, that they have to be more cognizant of their business model as well.
And to that point, that's really the core of what Ken and I were working on over the past 18 months, was influencing the business models, because that is where change really needs to happen. There's an interesting slide that I have up here, and it's called Bridging the Gap slide. I don't know if you can click on that, Max, or not, but it really tells the complete story of what I'm getting at here. In industry right now, there's a plethora of, yeah, that's the slide there. There's a plethora of information out there, a lot of great information about moving yourself to the cloud, moving your technology to the cloud, moving this way, moving that way. The point being, it's a lot of great data, but what we found is that there was a gap, and the gap was there was nothing that was telling people to here's how you actually do it. Some practical, street-level guidance. Ken and I call it a prescriptive approach. And we actually boiled it down even further. We went down to the sales, the marketing, operations level, and we said, if you want to really make a movement, here are the definitive things that you need to do to make the movement in those particular areas. Very prescriptive, very detailed, but the whole point was it helped them take that first step. You take that first step, you can take that second step, and it got them on the road. Well, the problem across the board that we found in every ecosystem was that partners weren't making the step because they didn't know what step to take or what direction to take. And I don't want to say we solved it 100%, but we really got to the point of getting them to be prescriptive about it.
Okay. Ken?
Well, really, as someone who's been in the market for 20-some years in the channel, in the IT area, and has seen the evolution of the channel evolve for the last 20, 25 years, that every so many years something new comes up. When the land technology started to happen, when other on-premise client-server approaches, and now we saw some managed service, we saw the cloud approach. What generally happens is it takes the channel 2 to 3 years to figure out the business model, figure out the plan, how to make money. And we said, with the cloud accelerating, we need something very formulistic in place, very recipe-driven, very prescriptive, as Keith said, that will accelerate that channel growth and channel value. Because margins are less, cost of sales have to be managed more effectively, sales has to be managed more effectively, marketing has to be executed brilliantly. That rather than thrashing around for 2 or 3 years, what we did is we came up with a tool to assess the maturity level of that partner in their operations, their marketing and sales, and scored on a 1 to 4 basis. And then based upon that recommendation, we've actually created a tool to generate up to 28 different guides, best practices, worksheets, tools to help that partner really move faster. So from a vendor perspective, from a distribution perspective, and from that solution provider perspective, everyone can accelerate through that channel change.
Okay, so I mean, basically, in regards to distributing this content, in essence, on and above your sort of in-person meetings, what's working for you? Are you working LinkedIn groups or Twitter or any of the social media platforms?
We certainly are, but we're working with a lot of manufacturers, distributors, I would say, and allowing them to take advantage of the tools to build out their partner channels. Okay. Because they have an interest in driving their partner adoption. So we're doing webcasts from an educational perspective through the channel. We're doing live events at some of the conferences where we're speaking, holding boot camps, and really allowing people to get their hands into the tools to really impact their business.
Sounds good. I mean, this is probably a pretty generic question, but I'm interested nonetheless. Keith, do you have any idea on the average cost per lead? I mean, can you share any sort of cost per leads data in regards to sort of any, let's call it broad cloud-based categories? I mean, I'm curious to see what you guys, what when you speak to a vendor, what your conversion rates are, what the average conversion rates are, and what the average cost per lead is. And
yeah,
maybe you don't even get that granular. I don't know, but I'm pretty sure you guys do.
Well, we're trying to get there. They're all making this movement right now, and it's interesting you say that because it's some of the data that Ken and I are trying to collect right now. The whole point of why we wanted to talk about gravity and thought leadership was exactly to the point you're making there, Max, is cost of lead, efficiency, more net leads. Creating gravity lowers all of that. Sometimes even eliminates it. Think of it this way. You have... in fact, this is a pretty relevant conversation. I had a water problem in my house the other week. So what did I do? I didn't go into the phone book and call up all these different plumbers, right? I actually called a friend who said, call this guy, don't call anybody else. And then called him out of the blue. And so what happened? This person created a natural way for me to get to him and created a gravity, if you will, in the marketplace. I'm not the first one to call him up out of the blue, and I won't be the last because this guy's reputation and knowledge and whatever in plumbing preceded him. So what's the cost of lead for him on that? It's zero.
Yeah,
he didn't do any advertising to me. He didn't do anything like that. I picked the phone up and I called him. So that's why, to your point, we're kind of solving that coming around. Now, on the metrics and everything, we have to do a little bit more digging to really get some granularity on that, but I think we're trying to solve it by going the thought leadership route.
Mm-hmm. Max, let me just jump on that because in the research we did, Keith and I ran focus groups with a very large software developer and looked at their partners who were focused already in the cloud. And in that research we found that they were, on average, were only doing 2.6 campaigns a quarter, or 2.6 events a quarter. And in the cloud business, because of the need to generate additional lead generations, we have to triple that. So we know what the numbers need to be. They're also dependent upon the size and maturity of the partner. So we were shocked that the average person who was already in the cloud for at least 24 months, we're still only generating 2.5 marketing events per quarter.
Very, very low.
Steve, let me. Can I have you jump into this conversation as well? In regards, I mean, I don't know whether you're, how much you're focused on the marketing and sales piece for Intel, but what channels, what strategies are working best for Intel at the moment in regards to just general lead generation?
Well, so Intel is an interesting organization in that we don't typically sell directly to customers. It's more about brand awareness and product line awareness in conjunction with our OEM partners like Dell, HP, and then the broader channels internationally. If you look at the way that Intel has typically gone to market, it's through a variety of means, and what you're seeing over the last couple of years is the increase in the use of some of the social media, and similar to what Keith and Max were talking about. We're talking about where the this notion of using experts to help drive the message. We've actually got a program called IT at Intel, where the actual IT folk who run the Intel networks, run our data centers, write papers, do webinars, go speak to at conferences and to customers to understand how do I use technology in a broad, large multinational organization, and how Intel's technologies help them, because we eat our own dog food, take advantage of or expand into new markets. Similarly, people like myself, principal engineers and fellows from Intel, regularly work with customers, with the channel partners to help deliver the message to, whether it be conference settings, webinars, podcasts, as well as some of the new blogging efforts that have been coming with some of our social media collaborations around new marketing. So when the Ultrabooks came out and when new products come out, you'll see a broad range of marketing efforts that we do along those lines.
Yeah, I think the expert. I mean, again, I'm going to agree with everything being said here. I think what I can add on to the discussion about having an expert share their information is that I think we all want to believe in somebody. We want to connect to a human being. It's very difficult to connect to a company, but you can connect so much easier to a CEO or a VP who's telling you truly, well, I believe, I'm passionate about, this particular expertise or this particular goal, and as long as as long as that audience has that shared belief, then basically, your conversions should be strong. Keith, education, the role of education. I mean, experts, gurus. That we're all getting to really. The bottom line is educating. Who are you seeing out there that's using education effectively in regards to lead generation? It certainly sounds like Intel are using it effectively. Is there anyone else that you think would be worth sharing?
It is interesting. You're starting to see a shift with all the major vendors on doing more education. I work with a vendor here in the mobility space, a company called FiberLink, and they're doing an excellent job in pushing this out. Actually, pushing out the message of here's educating the marketplace on why mobility is so important and why you need to manage mobility and MDM and all of this stuff. And they're creating webinars around, expertise in discussing this notion. And it's interesting because this whole space of mobility is at the forefront of needing education. So think of it this way: if you're a vendor and you get on the forefront of educating the marketplace, well, then you're by default the expert in that because you're the first ones to educate on it, right?
Right.
So they're doing an excellent job on staying on the forefront and really teaching and elaborating and educating, and I like to use the word evangelizing a lot about these sort of notions. That's on one front. Now on the other front, you have solution providers and resellers and the like who are very regionally based, who take the approach of educating on their entire portfolio. So you might have multiple vendors in their portfolio, and they're educating on maybe a total solution in a particular vertical space, which Ken and I found to be very important for success in the cloud, and they're pushing that education out. Very small firm that Ken and I did work with in the Washington, D.C. area really push out a strong vertical expertise, if you will, into the marketplace. Now you're going to say, Washington, D.C., they must be government. Wrong. they were healthcare. Which is interesting because you're like, they capitalized on an expertise within a particular marketplace and then pushed that out strong. They became the experts in the marketplace and created a really nice niche. They did it all by educating the community. So that's a regional-based one, and then I was talking about a vendor-based one.
Max, I was going to also talk about the vertical issue because what we found is that obviously with the cloud changing the business model, that the partners had to look at velocity models of how they change the velocity of order pattern, the velocity to reduce their cost of sales. And so verticalization going into a niche market made a lot of sense. So we've actually created prescriptive tools to teach partners really how to build that vertical area. The second piece that impacts that business model is what we call the cross-sell, upsell. Interesting enough, we found some work about the need for solution partners who are really growing fast. 86% of them were going to initialize a cross-sell, upsell campaign. But in going out and doing surveys and questionnaires with partners, we found that very few channel partners, solution providers, understood how to cross-sell, upsell. And in the cloud, because we're now going to have a need to create greater wallet share for each of our end user customers, and as Keith talked about, adding 6 to 8 new products to my portfolio, I've got to really understand how to cross-sell, upsell my various products into each account. And so not only education around that side, but also really trying to understand how to be more effective at penetrating your existing customers.
Can you share some of that strategy to cross-sell, upsell?
Sure, and Keith, feel free to jump in on this. For an example, with this one particular vendor, we mapped out their particular products, and laid out 7 or 8 different products that they could potentially have sold into an account. And then onto that, we said, what professional services would I sell onto that product? And then we said, if they already have this particular product, what would be the next logical product from that vendor that I should sell? And then what would be the next logical third product that I could sell? Well, then we took it to the next step and said, okay, beyond that one vendor, let's map down the other vendors that that particular partner had. And so now they said, if I had sold this particular product, say from a Microsoft perspective, maybe there might be a natural Citrix product that may tie with that. And so all of a sudden the partner could see, I now have a month-to-month game plan, penetrate all my existing accounts more effectively. So cross-sell, upsell became a major issue in solving the cloud acceleration program we built.
Okay, but sorry, go ahead.
Well, and to add to that, when you really take a look at how you're going to amplify your sales rates and the number of opportunities you close, it's not only the ability to upsell product lines, to what Ken was saying, and cross-sell across your entire portfolio, but now that you're adding newer products and services into your portfolio from newer vendors, you need to easily map those to the existing portfolio to be able to do exactly what we're talking about. So think of it this way: you have 4 products, and then you have 3 cross-sells for each one, and then you add another one. All of a sudden, it goes from like 12 to 15, and then it really becomes exponential almost in the number of sales opportunities you can create for your organization if you map it appropriately and correctly.
Okay, so just on that point, I mean, obviously, I think we'll all agree that the customer acquisition, the initial conversion is the hardest, right? So theoretically, when you're upselling going forward, that should be a slightly easier process because there's already a connection. What's working best for you in regards to that second, third, or fourth product sale? Is it old school communication and telephone work in essence, or do you feel that there's a role for email conversion with new products as well?
It depends upon. I'm sorry, Keith. Go ahead.
I say it really depends upon your company and the practices you have. Let's go back a couple steps to what we were talking about. What was working, right? So if you do it right, your email is going to lead to your thought leadership, expertise, webinars,
right,
which will then drive the second, third, fourth products that you have in your portfolio on the cross-sell. Okay? So it's all those mechanisms there. If you create a good gravity, then those second, third, fourth cross-sells, to our point about the cost of the lead, goes down and down and down.
Right.
So that's the point of all of that, because everything ties into one another. You don't do cross-sell, upsell good unless you have a really good gravity going to your business, and then you can more easily sell a proposition into your existing customer, and then it becomes really sticky once you get 2 and 3 and 4 things in there. Ken?
It also jumps out at you that if I'm addressing the SMB market, or if I'm addressing the mid to enterprise size market, how I work with those people are different based upon either the relationship I have and the level of relationship I have, and how comfortable and how trustworthy those people are with you. So in the SMB market, we found that if you're selling 15 seats or less, it has to be a 2-step kind of environment to keep your marketing cost of sales down in order to increase that velocity. So having that relationship becomes very critical in both cases, but how you attack those people would be different.
Ken, let me ask you just in the last couple of minutes here for you guys, in regards to the new compensation models that are out there, what can you share with us to that end?
Well, 2 things. You really have to, because of the vendors having different payment plans, you really have to understand not only the upfront commissions or royalties you get, but there's maybe a renewal commission rate at the end of the first year or at the end of the second year. So you have to understand each of your vendors. And it's becoming more complex because as different vendors put together different solution provider commission rates or royalty rates or margin rates, it becomes more difficult. But what we really try to do is say, if the strategic goal of the company is to attract net new customers, I want to pay a little extra bounty for that. Number two, what I try to do is calculate the 12-month commission rate of the value of 12 months worth of payments. And I'll pay 50% of that commission day one, and 50% of that commission, the remaining 50% of that commission, at about the 6th month. When that cloud application renews for the 2nd year, I will pay a smaller percentage on the renewal. But at that point, I'm really driving my sales organization to capture new customers. So it depends on your strategy. Compensation is strategic, not tactical. So you really have to think about how you do that. But rather than paying commission each month, we like to suggest you pay it twice, pay a lump sum based upon the 12-month value.
Sounds good. Perfect. Okay, guys. Well, I'm going to move on to Steve now. Steve is a senior security architect and principal engineer at Intel. And Steve is going to share his insight into security for private clouds. Steve, we've got 2 options in regards to presentation. I'd prefer if do you have the presentation up on your desktop?
I do.
Okay, because I'm noticing that when I'm actually, this is something for all of us, when in these Google Hangouts, I think it's actually best to have the speaker have their own presentation on their desktop. From just a coordination perspective, as I'm sure you guys will do some Hangouts in the future yourself, but it's probably best, we'll have a sort of a more fluid experience now, I think, with Steve working through his own presentation. Steve, do you have that? Do you have it open up on your desktop?
So I did the screen share. I'm going to do the screen share.
Exactly right. Screen share, then just select where you see your presentation, and then that's going to come up on our screen.
Interesting enough, it doesn't show up.
I've got it open here, so I can do the same as what I did. Do you want me to?
Could you? I'll just tell you to move from slide to slide. Unfortunately, it's not seeing the presentation from Google.
That's fine. Just 1 second here.
Sure. Is my video gone?
No, you're good. You're there. Now we're going to see my video, correct?
Perfect.
Okay. All right. So, Steve, take it away.
Absolutely, thank you. So today we're going to talk about security for private clouds. And if you move to the next foil, the agenda really is to start understanding the challenges to private cloud security, and then from there look at some of the key building blocks to building trustworthy private clouds. And then I want to end on a quick note on the broader private cloud security landscape. What are some of the types of technologies or categories of technologies that organizations should look at when looking to build out or transition to a private cloud strategy. So on the next slide, we talk. There really are 4 key areas to consider when thinking about private cloud. Number 1 is more tactical. Is how do you protect and defend the virtual infrastructure upon which your private cloud sits. The second is how to deal with the regulatory challenges when you start bringing applications from their various silos together into a private cloud. Even inside an organization, data controls and privacy protection is still going to be important to audit and maintain. The next item on the list is to understand how the transformation to private cloud has an absolute effect on the enterprise security products and technologies that you've already deployed. And then making sure that as you deploy your private cloud, you future-proof or get ready for the fact that as soon as you get successful in the private, you're going to have people asking for the public. They're going to want to know what services that can they deploy into the private cloud from the public, as well as how do they onboard their services when the time is right. And so future-proofing the implementation is going to be very important. So on slide 4 is a list of some of the key security challenges for the virtual infrastructure, and I just listed a couple examples in there, like the integrity attacks on the virtual infrastructure and the firmware and the BIOS, attacks on virtualization like VM jumping, co-tenancy threats, and then ultimately some of the unique challenges that we find when dealing with VMs and network security. And VMs and network security is a unique one in that most of your network security devices we're very good at dealing with network problems. What happens when you have a virtual infrastructure and you have communication between applications, between systems on the same virtual host? it's important to recognize that your typical network security devices are unaware of this communication and therefore can't provide the protection there. On slide 5, we talk a little bit about the regulatory challenges, compliance in a virtual environment, achieving and maintaining that audit and visibility that you need, especially as we start bringing in apps from multiple organizations within the company or within an organization, making sure that you can have consistent audit and visibility across those different applications and databases and workloads. And then here's really gets to the meat of the issue, is the commingling of regulatory environments. So as you start to bring in HR applications with mission-critical apps that could potentially be part of critical infrastructure, or you're bringing in banking apps, if you're a banking organization at the same time that you're bringing in other kinds of information, that commingling can actually have a very adverse effect to your regulatory standing or to your monitoring standing, and making sure that you have the proper controls, because on a system you're going to default to the lowest common denominator, in that whatever admins and access controls are provided to that virtual infrastructure stack are going to apply to any workload that's running there. And so you make sure, one thing that we see a lot of people looking at is to basically, as we call it, round up. So when you start to implement the controls on a given system, you think about what are the regulatory environments, and you pick the most restrictive as your starting point, so that any workload that runs in there can be covered when it comes to auditing that environment. And then obviously putting into place the continuous monitoring and the data use controls that are necessary to achieve compliance with the various different regulations. And one thing that we are watching is that the regulations are evolving. So 2.5, 3 years ago, we didn't have a lot of prescriptive guidance for how to deal with virtualized and cloud-based environments in the HIPAAs and the FISMA and other regulatory environments, PCI, etc. In the last couple of years, we've started to see specific guidance from the regulatory bodies and from the government agencies to help organizations understand what it means to be FISMA compliant or PCI compliant in a cloud or virtualized infrastructure. On the next slide, slide 6, we talk a little bit about what is the transformative issues with enterprise security. And really, it comes down to asking hard questions of your service providers and of your vendors. How will their network security solutions deal with virtual assets that never leave the box? How do you provide that monitoring and detections that can inspect both virtual hosts and the communications of virtual hosts? It's also important to know is how do those technologies that do inspection, detection, and remediation deal with offline and online virtual hosts? It's one thing to detect an application that's up and running, but how do you detect a vulnerability of an application that's currently just an image on a hard disk until it's been loaded? And how do you keep up with the number of what we call VM sprawl of all the potential workloads that are floating around? Another key thing is that how do these new virtual appliances, and we're seeing a lot of companies deploy their solutions and their technologies in a virtual appliance kind of form factor, how do they integrate and are compatible with existing security and network control solutions? How do you manage those virtual appliances using your system management infrastructure? And ultimately, what it comes down to is a key question that I think a lot of people are starting to ask, and they need to ask their vendors and their cloud providers and their service providers, is what solutions are they providing that are delivered as a service? How can I take advantage of the new business models that I'm adopting for my own private cloud for the security services and the security technologies that I want to deploy? So with all that in mind, let's move on to slide 7, please. It's one back, Max. And talk about what are some of the key building blocks for achieving trustworthy private clouds. And one of the starting points is, it both deals with the tactical problem of how do you protect the virtual infrastructure, as well as it gives you a secure foundation to go forward, is creating a chain of trust rooted in hardware that extends all the way up through the virtual infrastructure stack. You can use this hardware-rooted trust to provide the virtual infrastructure protections, but it also goes a long way for giving you an anchor point to start to build your trust, build your policies, and build your controls with a known good state, and then start to do the continuous monitoring from there. One other key thing that we've seen with a lot of the customers we've worked with, and a lot of the cloud providers as well, both public and private, is you've got to build and provide for visibility from the get-go. You got to build it in. You can't bolt it on. And similar to the same kind of notion as with security itself, you can't bolt it on. You have to build it in. in order to achieve continuous monitoring requirements and being able to do regular audits that go up and down the stack, you need to be able to get that inspection point. You need that transparency or visibility, and that has to be built in as part of the solution design. As I mentioned, once you have that anchor and trust, you can then start to build more granular and more powerful policies and controls for the activity that you want to allow in your private cloud. And using that trust that you built as a starting point and then integrating that into your policy management infrastructure so that you can use trust as part of the VM migration or dynamic provisioning policies. You can make decisions about which workloads can go where. And so if you've implemented better controls and better security monitoring for specific systems within a private cloud, you can designate them as such and then implement controls that control where those workloads can run and when and what type of auditing infrastructure is available. And then, of course, make sure that you implement cloud and virtualization aware security solutions and services. And I'm going to talk a little bit through this in the next couple of foils. On slide 8, I wanted to hit on a couple of the key the way you can enable hardware trust. It has to come from the hardware. And this is technology that Intel has been providing in our servers as clients that starts with TXT on the bottom, trusted execution technology, which basically does the secure launch of the system from the hardware through the BIOS and firmware up into the hypervisor so that you can know you've started from a clean, unmessed with, rootkitted hypervisor. And that hypervisor becomes the building block for your virtual private cloud infrastructure. We've also enabled AES and ISO, a new instruction set in the CPU for our servers and clients. It's been out for a couple of years now that allows you to be able to get crypto acceleration native in the hardware. So as you start to do encrypt everything everywhere all the time in a virtual environment, you could get the encryption load itself could get very heavy. And so having the CPU offload a lot of the crypto functionality into the chipset and into the chip allows you to achieve those goals of data encryption, compliance for data control management solutions at the same time of being able to leverage the private cloud security. So on slide 9, once you have that hard-rooted trust with trusted execution technology in the server, and you can then report or attest using trusted computing group protocols for remote attestation, now you can start to designate what are considered trusted systems versus just vanilla systems. And so a model that we've been working with the broader industry is on something called trusted compute pools. And what trusted compute pools allow you to do is to designate pools or clusters or systems within your virtual cloud and then be able to designate these as trusted and these workloads can only run on trusted systems. So you leverage the existing infrastructure, whether it be VMware or Xen or whatever, what have you, that does your normal provisioning based on capacity. You now add security as one of the factors for determining where a workload can be provisioned to or where it can be migrated to and from by designated trusted systems and workloads that need trust. Built into this also is the ability for both the virtual infrastructure and your compliance or GRC infrastructure to audit not only where the workloads are, but what the trust level of the systems they ran on. And so being able to provide deep visibility into the stack all the way down to the hardware, reporting the values, reporting the measurements that were taken of that hypervisor, allow you to achieve the security and the trust and the compliance all within the same kind of solution stack. So if we move on to the next slide, one of the things I wanted to point out is about a year ago I did along with a couple of analyst firms, we looked at what was the private cloud security landscape. And what we found was that many of the key vendors in the existing security policy compliance management environment were making their products, as we would call it, virtualization or cloud aware. And so there are vendors available today that are providing configuration and system management, policy and access control, and GRC SIM that are all virtualization or private cloud aware. And you need to work with your vendors to find out if their products are doing this. Similarly, we find that there are specific companies that are coming out that are providing virtualization infrastructure security as their business. So there's several startups. I can mention one like HighTrust, for example. They're specifically in the business of providing policy controls and hypervisor hardening. The cloud security gateways and network security for private clouds, we're seeing a lot of the vendors coming from both directions. You're seeing existing security vendors make their products cloud aware, and you're seeing new startups and new companies evolve that are specifically targeting this virtualized and cloud environment and providing you the security necessary. On the next slide, another key area to watch for is this whole sort of sub-industry that's spun up, which are the virtual security appliances. And they comprise of your typical hardware, software solutions that you would find in your normal IT operations environment: network, firewall, intrusion prevention, antivirus, malware analysis, and malware prevention, as well as all the other kind of single sign-on and data protection DLP solutions, are all moving towards either a virtual appliance form factor, in that they can run as their own workload and fully manage within a virtualized environment, get access through DOM0, through other APIs, the ability to inspect the virtual network traffic. We're seeing virtual guest security solutions that are looking at how do you optimize doing the kind of security that's necessary in a virtualized private cloud world. One of the key examples of this is antivirus offload, being able to consolidate that antivirus workload across multiple guests. And then finally, we're seeing security as a service being delivered now to organizations, both in the private and the public cloud. Some of the key areas, the first sort of areas where those have jumped up have been around identity, single sign-on, and defederation. But we're now starting to see monitoring as a service and data loss prevention or data leak prevention as a service, as a business model that both new startups as well as some of the old guard are starting to look to adopt and deliver. So we're seeing this sort of convergence of both existing vendors moving into private cloud security and new vendors coming up specifically targeting it with their best-of-breed solutions. So in summary, on slide 12, the risks, there are both real and perceived risks. Some of them are more tactical, some of them more strategic in design nature, but they can be mitigated. But it does take an ecosystem of software and hardware providers providing deep visibility into the stack, as well as aligning with governments with monitoring and assessments and audit capabilities, leveraging the trust that you can build into that infrastructure, and making sure that you work with your vendors, your OEMs, and your service providers to get the cloud or private cloud and virtualization aware solutions and technologies into your environment. Make sure that they're providing the capability to you at the time and you need it, and design, and basically contract it in. Make sure that they're providing you what you need, not only for the security in a virtual environment, but also for that deep visibility. And with that, I think you can achieve some of the security and compliance requirements that you're going to have on these interesting workloads and deployments within the private cloud. Max, back to you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Steve. I appreciate that. Let me just move this off screen share, so there you go, you can see me. Steve, what are the upcoming regulatory challenges are you focused on?
I think that some of the key ones we're watching is, right now there's a lot of activity around FedRAMP, which is the federal cloud initiative and the controls and continuous monitoring. I think one of the key things that we're seeing is some of the challenges on the public cloud space or the hybrid cloud space with doing continuous monitoring and having the right levels of audits with cloud providers. We've seen one of the things where we've seen a lot of innovation is in what we call these hosted private clouds, where we have a private cloud environment that's actually hosted externally, and so you can start to feel what the pain would be like without actually having to take on the full risk of a public cloud. I think we're about a year and a half into the PCI adoption of the cloud, the new cloud supplement, and so I think what we'll start to see is some of that, those best practices start to filter back out to the industry. And then finally, we have to keep a watchful eye on Europe and on NISA as they continue to innovate and drive data control and data security standards, and the effects that those have on some of these more complex cloud infrastructures, especially around things like geolocation requirements for data, for citizen data. I think will be uniquely challenging as we look forward.
Ken, do you want to comment on how regulation is affecting sales, just to kind of mix it up a bit here?
Well, it's interesting. I was just thinking about that question when you asked it. We talked about going vertical earlier, and I think that's a very good sales and marketing strategy. But the regulatory issues around that are very important, because there are certain industries who you have to be able to address the regulatory reforms, and it opens up new sales opportunities. Obviously, with the healthcare plan coming down from the government, it opened up a lot of opportunities to go after hospitals and go after the physicians and be able to offer new areas. In the financial area, One of our partners that we've worked with actually hired a regulatory guru, and he became their thought leader and ran the webcasts and issues around the regulatory issues facing the financial industry. And it was brought to market by the solution provider. And they saw their business grow dramatically because of that issue. So regulatory issues open up sales, and that's why, in fact, I just finished a book this weekend on sales growth. It's a really good read. And one of the examples in there specifically talked about understanding your marketplace and go for growth before your competitors do. And if you're smart and you're on top of the regulatory issues that are driving business opportunity, you can find new markets.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to, from a marketing perspective, do you want to add anything there? Where, marketing-wise, where are you finding? What's your best source for staying on top of regulatory issues?
Well, it's interesting. Stephen mentioned FISMA, and there's a client here I work with, and they were one of the first ones to become FISMA certified. Well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what they did next. They took that being first mover, and in their particular space, I should say, and then they took that, and a lot of their webinars, a lot of their talks, a lot of their discussion points were around becoming one of the first ones to actually have the foresight to take that on, i.e. becoming that thought leadership. So when it comes to marketing and regulatory issues, it's really interesting how if you become a first mover on this on a regulatory area and become certified, you can then leverage that into your thought leadership and your expertise and into all your marketing messages.
Mm-hmm. Terrific, Steve. Share as much as you're comfortable, but can you give me some idea of your top 3 sales targets as they relate to private cloud?
Well, that would not be something I could really comment on because I'm not in the sales organization. I drive product security strategy. So,
is there anything you can share on that end?
So I think that some of the key things we're driving is the broader adoption of these technologies, both for private and public clouds. And so some of the way that we go after that is through organizations like ODCA, the Open Data Center Alliance, which is a group of basically customers that are either building clouds internally or taking advantage of public cloud facilities and are looking for how do they achieve the maximum efficiency and security with the infrastructures they want to deploy. And so really it's about helping organizations understand how to leverage Intel technologies and the ecosystem to achieve their IT and their operational goals around security, efficiency, and performance. And so the way that we look at it is how do we help educate and move the industry to adopt these new technologies and to deploy them widely.
Okay, but any particular niche or vertical that Intel's going after, or?
I mean, Intel's a large company, Max. We go after all verticals.
Right.
We've been working very closely with NIST to help the U.S. government and the other foreign agencies that use NIST as a guidepost to understand how to leverage the FISMA, the 853 guidelines, or the new BIOS requirements. We also work with the CSA, the Cloud Security Alliance, and the Trusted Computing Group to help organizations be able to achieve these goals using standards that are published, because I think one of the things we believe is accelerating standards will help the industry be able to adopt these things in scale. And that's really the key, is that you can do some nice, interesting pilots with these technologies, but to really scale, you need a broad vendor adoption of key standards, and you need the ability to deploy these solutions on a large number of systems consistently. And so that's where Intel is sort of helping various different markets, healthcare, pharmaceutical, government, and just about it, and financial, of course. But really, with the side, Intel is a large company, and we really do target just about every vertical that you can imagine.
Right. Ken, can you give me some predictions? Where do you think, from a sales perspective and cloud computing, what predictions can you share with us for the
based on based on the experience of the last 18 months? Keith and I have been writing about this for 2 years and actually implementing our programs with many manufacturers and distributors and certainly solution providers. If I you can read the industry information. It says that 36% of all the revenue coming out of the channel will be some sort of cloud-based revenue. I think it's actually going to go faster than that. I think you're going to see that it'll be close to 50% within 24 months because people are getting into the velocity model. They're understanding how to impact their business. So I think you're going to see a big drive. Now, the challenge with that is the revenue model to the solution provider and the revenue model to the vendors changes. When you move Office 365 from a price point of what it was from an on-premise opportunity, and you now have a new product, Office 365, that even includes SharePoint at a very inexpensive monthly number. Those revenue models, both at the manufacturer level and the solution partner level, change. So you have to be careful of the dollar projection of cloud. But we see partners are adopting cloud-based solutions faster than they adopted managed service solutions, for example.
Guys, Steve, Keith, any predictions, anything you want to share in the final minutes?
The only thing I would add to what Ken was saying is years ago selling was it was complex, long sales cycles, very complex, you know, and all of that. And now it has turned to because of the cloud, it's turning more towards simplicity. What Ken was getting at, you know, volume versus velocity. You need to be simple. You need to make more transactions when it comes to the cloud, and it needs to be they need to be simple transactions. The bottom line, though, is across every different facet within cloud, the core concept of efficiency really is where it needs to be at. If your organization is efficient in your sales, your marketing, your operations, you can accomplish anything. Complex sale, simple sale, volume versus velocity, anything. You need to become efficient at it. If you become efficient at it, you create a machine, and that's what this whole recurring revenue model is all about, is creating that machine and that mechanism.
Sounds good. And same question to you, Steve. Have you got a prediction you want to leave us with?
Absolutely. I think one of the things is we track the adoption of private and public clouds going forward. We're seeing more vendors starting to build virtualization and cloud-aware solutions, but I think the key thing that we're all tracking is the move to security as a service. And how I think one of the things we're just seeing the beginnings of is how that changes the business models for both the security industry as a whole, as well as for the organizations that are adopting it. It's not the same process of how you consume security when you start to consume it as a service. And the whole risks mitigation and risk calculation start to get really interesting when you can start to plug and play security services much quickly and much more dynamically. So I think tracking forward, I think it's going to be an interesting thing to watch is how security as a service transforms not just the security industry, but how IT and how organizations adopt security. I think that's going to be a very interesting to watch going forward.
Terrific. Gentlemen, you've all been absolutely on point. I thank you very much for your time. I'll be sharing this a recorded copy of this interview with all of you, and hopefully we can get you back on the show in the next couple of months to share an update on the content that was shared today. So thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Max.
Bye-bye.